Today is Vav Tishrei. Yes, the Rebbe's Tzimchan is here outside. And it's the middle of a series of Teshuva. It's a time which is called Kiruv HaMa'or El HaNitzotz. It's a time when the luminary, that's Hashem, is close to the spark. Every one of us has a spark of Hashem inside of us. And that spark is feeling connected during this time. That's what it means that Dirshu Hashem behi motzei kra'u b'yosei karev. The Navi Yeshayahu says, seek Hashem when he's found and call him when he's close. Hashem is really close now. So all year round, if a tzibur, a community davens, you get answered all year round. But if a yochid, which means an individual, davens, he'll not necessarily get answered all year round. But on a series of Teshuva, a yochid gets answered. The word yochid is an individual. The word yochid also means the soul is called a yechida, the only one, the one that's connected. And so the soul is feeling it right now. The soul is feeling the connection. And the question at hand is, are we able to align our external selves with our internal selves? Internally, your soul feels God during a series of Teshuva. Externally, well, very much depends on you. We could be really confused. You saw that really spectacular clip that's going around. Everyone's seeing it right now. And you have this guy wearing he's wearing a kafia, and he's wearing a Palestinian flag, and he's got the whole thing in him, but he's Jewish.
Oh, it's marching?
And most likely he's being paid to march. And, I'm not sure if he knows what he's marching about, but whatever, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And then there's these two Bachrim over there, and they're like, okay, but he's Jewish. So, and he's no problem with it. He's going on, while he's marching, he's rolling up his sleeve, putting on the tefillin, absolutely, and the tefillin on top, and the yarmulke, while he's marching about that. That's what it means, that the external part of ourselves and who we are internally are simply not aligned. They're misaligned. And our goal is to connect them together. This past year, I think when we're, looking back at the year, we've seen Hashem's hand manifest and revealed, and the closeness of Hashem more than any other time in a long, long, long time. Which means it wasn't a pretty year. It started off very ugly, but very godly, because it got us right away to realize that we are Hashem's people. And so we may not have liked what happened, but it got us to be connected. But the past couple of weeks, like 3 weeks or so that's gone on, something changed in the whole energy of everything. It's like Am Yisrael coming to realize, hey, whatever this world thinks is not to our benefit, and therefore we look the world in the face and tell them that no. We'll first take care of ourselves, and then we'll have a conversation with you. And we're saying it loud and clear. And then we're doing these miracles, and like in the 6-day war, you maybe saw such miracles. But these things that are going on, there's this makas b'chayres happening on their side with the beepers. And yeah, it's a lot of Yiddish kop, but it's also, it's miraculous. And then the way they knock this guy out, and that guy, and that guy, and that guy, and every head, and the next guy becomes a head, they knock him out too. And it's one after another. And then, what can you say when right before Rosh Hashanah for the second time this year, these guys, they throw at us 180 ballistic missiles. Each one of those missiles, they're not little toys. They're murderous little, massive, giant things. And we did not intercept all of them. Pretty good at intercepting, but we did not succeed in intercepting all of them. And what happens? Nothing. Except for God's sense of humor. One, murderer in Gaza over there, whatever, in Jericho gets killed. Okay. But the rest of it, and I saw a picture of a Chabad house in Gedera, which 2 hours before was filled with kids in the front yard. And then there's a crater. And it's not in the building, it's on the floor. Nothing. And then this building in an apartment building in Tel Aviv gets hit and nothing happens, don't the other side realize at some point that Allah is on the other side, not on their team? At some point you got to realize, where is God? But what Hashem wants from us is to internalize that and to get close to Him. And this process of getting close to Hashem, because Hashem is like, I'm here, I'm with you, I'm in your life. But I want you to feel that and to realize that's the truth of who you are. So that you can take this message and live with it all year round and not be afraid and be you, the true you of who you are. That's what Hashem is looking for. So how do we do this work? The work is called Teshuva. So I want to share with you a story. The story is one of the first and greatest Baalei Teshuva who ever lived. He was also one of the most notorious wicked villains who ever lived. And his name was King Menashe. Now, King Menashe in Sefer Melachim, where he's brought, it just says he was the worst king. He was evil, he was wicked, he was notorious. He knew everything what he was doing, right? His father was a big tzaddik. His father was Chizkiyahu. But he was just lahachis. In every single thing he did, he wanted to do bedafka. So he brought idols into the Beis HaMikdash. He managed to get everyone in the whole country to serve idols themselves. And he did all the three big ones. He served idols, he murdered, and he committed adultery, everything. In fact, prophets would come over to him and try and admonish him. So one of those prophets was Yeshayahu HaNavi. And it wasn't Stam a prophet, it was his grandfather. Yeshayahu's daughter married King Chizkiyahu, and out came Menashe. So he had great lineage. And there's a whole medrash over there that his grandfather, whatever, was running away from him because he was mad at him, because he was screaming at him that this base of is going to be destroyed, and you're evil and wicked and do tshuva. So I don't know what the story is, but he went into a tree and he kind of like aligned himself and became part of the tree. And Menashe came and himself cut the tree off at the point of the mouth, and he killed his grandfather in the process. So he was a murderer too. He did everything wrong, and he refused under any circumstances to listen to any sense of rebuke and teshuva, nothing. And it was so bad that at some point Hashem said, I've had enough. So the Mishnah says Menashe is one of those kings. There's 7 individuals listed over there, kings and simpletons, commoners, that ein lahem chelek la'olam haba. He has no portion in the world to come. Why? It was a choytei umachti. He sinned and caused others to sin. That's all written in Sefer Melachim. And then you have Sefer Divrei Hayomim, which is much later in Tanakh. I think many people don't get to Divrei Hayomim, but you have Divrei Hayomim there too. And in Divrei Hayomim, there's a new story told about King Menashe. And the story is that Menashe was taken out and exiled by the Assyrian king. And he took him to Bavel. And when he brought him to Bavel, he tortured him to the point that he took a massive hot pan of fire, lit up the whole thing on fire, and he was slowly roasting Menashe on the fire. And if you think Menashe did tshuva at that point, you're wrong. Still didn't do tshuva. What he did was, he called out to every single idol he could think about. Because he knew all the idols, how to worship each one of them, and he tried every single idol, how to worship them and how to get out of them, and nothing worked. And Batzar Loi, when Menashe felt that it didn't, in other words, he was tortured and all the idols were not answering him, then Menashe turned to Hashem. And at that point, he turned to Hashem and he did Teshuva. And all the malachim, the angels, are upstairs in Shamayim. And they look and they say, we're not allowing this wicked villain, this murderer, this absolute, disgusting human being. He's a beast. We're not letting him enter. Tachas Kisei HaKoved. He's not coming to Shamayim. He's not being allowed in. So they blocked his tshuva from being accepted by Hashem. And Hashem said, if that's the case, they will say that the Baal Tshuva is not able to get in. So Hashem said, can't do that. I have to allow him in. What did Hashem do? Chatar lo chatira mitachas kisei hakovod. It was the first tunnel that was ever dug. Hashem dug a tunnel. I don't know what this means, where the tunnel was dug, but it means spiritually. And he made a tunnel, and the tunnel was able to lead all the way under Kisei HaKoved, Hashem's holy throne, and he allowed Menashe back in to do Teshuva. Note, even though it wasn't a proper Teshuva, he allowed him to do Teshuva. Now, the commentaries have a big problem with this. Why is it that Menashe is still known as a wicked king? And in fact, in Sefer Melachim, it doesn't say anything about his Teshuva. It leaves him as a wicked king. When you look at the years that he was king for, the longest serving king, for 55 years. Of those 55 years, 22 he was evil and wicked. And 33 he was a Baal Tshuva. So that's pretty impressive. Nonetheless, it's not mentioned that he did Teshuva. Why is it not mentioned? So there's the different commentaries. One of them, the Barbanel, I believe it is, explains that what he did in those 22 years was so bad and so evil that he wasn't ever able to undo it. So he caused all the people to sin. And as much as he came back and he was trying to do Teshuva, his Teshuva wasn't powerful enough to change the people, and so the people remained in a negative space. And so as much as he tried to do Teshuva, that didn't succeed. And so it's not mentioned over there later on. It's only mentioned in Sefer Melachim and not in Divrei Hayamim. So Menashe's Teshuva wasn't a real Teshuva. It was actually fake. In other words, it was a real Teshuva, but the reason behind it was fake. He only did Teshuva under duress because he was being tortured. What's interesting is that Menashe's father, Chizkiyahu HaMelech, who was a big tzaddik, also did Teshuva. And when you wonder what did Menashe do wrong that he had to do Teshuva for, here's what happened. What did Chizkiyahu do wrong? Chizkiyahu foresaw in a vision that he saw that he was going to have a wicked son. He saw that his child was going to be the worst of the worst, the most notorious king you could ever imagine. Now, if you see that about your kids, would you have a child? Remember, you control one thing, and that is whether you have a child or not. So he says, why would I have a child? I don't want to have a child. And he decided to not be with his wife. So that was it. And then you don't have a problem. The prophet Yeshayahu comes over to him because Chizkiyahu became ill. He became deathly ill. That deathly illness was a punishment. And Yeshayahu Hanavi comes over to him and he tells him, he says, because you refused to get married, that's what happened. That's why Hashem has now officially cut your life off and you're going to die. So it's a punishment for what you've done. Which is parenthetically a very, very interesting point in halacha. This is where we learn from all the halachas of family planning and contraception. One of the sources of them. Because what it means is, don't make any cheshbonos. Don't make Hashem's accounting and reckoning of what's going to be. So when you look at, how can I bring kids into the world, right? People after the Holocaust, like, how can I bring kids in such a bad world? Or things are so impossible to raise kids. Not your problem. It's Hashem's problem. And so Hashem said, sent Yeshayahu to tell Chizkiyahu that you're going to die. There's a lot of incredible facets to the story. What Chizkiyahu does at that point is, he turned around and he said to Yeshayahu, thank you very much for your prophecy. A guten Tag, he told the Navi, and then he turned around on his bed to the other side, and he davened to Hashem like he had never davened before. And he did Teshuva. And he said, Hashem, if you grant me life, I'm going to go back and I'll do what you want. I'll get married. I got it. And his Teshuva was so sincere that Ishayahu comes back to him, essentially telling him, I've never seen anything like this. No one ever undoes a prophecy. Like the Navi tells you something, that means it came from Hashem. And you succeeded in changing and undoing the word of Hashem and allowing Hashem to allow you in. It's unreal. You know what?
You're married my dad.
And then he tells him, they made a deal that let's get the best chances of this. And yes, Ishayahu's daughter married Chizkiyahu. And they figured that would give them a chance. Evidently, the end of the story is that Chizkiyahu was given another 15 years. During those 15 years, he begot Chizkiyahu, Menashe, and another child. Long story. But Menashe ended up being a big Rasha. So it looks like Hashem tells you, listen here, I'm deciding, you got to do your thing. And Menashe was born because Chizkiyahu had no choice. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, in Yaris Dvash, if I recall correctly, it's him. He has a whole different take on the story. He says, if you think that Chizkiyahu's prayer wasn't answered, think again. The prayer was absolutely answered. How so? Because Chizkiyahu succeeded in proving what Teshuva can do. Note the story. It's like a little twist on the story. The story is, Hashem tells Chizkiyahu that don't make Bahadi Kav Shidur Rahman Alamalach, don't decide Hashem's compassion. And he says, sorry. And so he has no choice. And he has a baby. And the baby is notorious. That's not the story. Chizkiyahu was dying to not have a baby who's a Rasha. But Hashem said, your child, that's his whole being. Sure, he has free choice, but he's a Rasha. You know, Menashe once came in a dream to Rav Ashi. Because Rav Ashi, many generations later, was teaching Gemara. Rav Ashi was the author of the Gemara. And he was teaching about Menashe. And he said, these wicked kings. And so Menashe came to him in a dream at night and said, really? He asked him, I want to ask you a halachic shaila. Do you know where you cut bread from? When you cut the lechem mishnah, where do you cut from? And he says, I don't know. And he said, well, I'll tell you where it is. And he told him from the crusty place. He says, and now I want to understand, if you're an Amoritz relative to us, so how dare you say that we're Rishayim? He says, but you were. Like, if you only understood how much of a Yetzer Hara, of an evil inclination we had in our days, you wouldn't say a word. Our inclination was so bad that we didn't even have a chance. What we did was, we used to wear dresses, right? The men wore dresses. So we wore tight, long dresses. So that we should, when we're running away, right? When we get that incredible taiva, it should be hard to run. You, if you would have been there, you would have worn a short dress so that you could easily run to the Avodah Zarah. Because that's how bad it was. So Menashe has a tremendous, tremendous Yetzer Hara. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, you know what his father successfully did? His father showed that don't take no for an answer ever. If Hashem tells you you're out, don't take it. Say no. Because I think it was Rabbi Melech Milizhensk who was once asked the questions. A guy told him, how do I do Teshuva? I didn't Aveira, how do I do Teshuva? He says, I don't know. How do you do an Aveira? How come you didn't ask me when you did the transgression, how you transgressed? That you don't ask me for. Hashem says, don't do it. And what do? You do it anyway. That's exactly how you do Teshuva. Even if Hashem says you can't do Teshuva, sometimes, or the Malachim say, you could. And when you allow the Teshuva to run through you, it works. And so the fact that Menashe was able to switch and change over completely and become a real Baal Teshuva, where did that come from? That's what his father succeeded in accomplishing. Get the message? Because his father did Teshuva, that's why he was able to change it. Teshuva, now we see both of Chizkiyahu in his moment and of Menashe in his moment is able to transform a person completely. It's able to get you from a space of being a Rasha to being a tzaddik completely. What happened with Menashe was a wind came, a ruach came, and took him from Bavel and brought him back to his throne in Yerushalayim. The ruach is the ruach toshuv le'elekim asher nasan, the pasuk says. There's a spirit that returns to Hashem. The spirit of return to Hashem is able to connect us. So how do you and I do this Teshuva? What does it even mean to do Teshuva? The first thing to notice is that Teshuva can come from even yiras hachet, yiras ha'inish, the fear of the punishment, or a little bit higher, the fear of the sin. Which means, I don't want to suffer the consequences, and that's why I'm returning to Hashem. Even that, which is the lowest level of tshuva, is able to transform us completely. To do teshuva, one of the ingredients, and you got to use this ingredient very, very carefully. The ingredient is called tears. And if you need an onion to get you to tears, that's not real. But the Arizal would say that kol mi she'einei boiche ba'aseres yemei teshuva ein nishmosei shleima. If someone doesn't cry during the 10 days of teshuva, his soul is not complete. So how do we get to cry? It's not by doing something that's going to make me cry. It's connecting to Hashem to the point that it leads to our eyes not being able to contain the enormity of the energy. One of the quintessential Baalei Teshuva in Gemara is known as Eliezer ben Drudaya in Gemara Avodah Zarah, Daf Yud Zayin. Eliezer ben Drudaya was notorious. He did every aveira in the book. He was very immoral, to say the least. And at some point, he hears about a particular woman that he hadn't been with. And it would take 7 oceans, 7 seas to get to her. Most people can hold their taiva for a couple of minutes, maybe. He held his incredible passion and addiction for as long as it took to cross 7 seas. That's a long time. And she also needed a full basket of gold coins. So he had to work hard to make sure to get what he needed to give her. He traveled, he arrived by her. That's a lot of commitment to an aveira. And when he arrived, she was so blown away by the depth of depravity of this guy. She couldn't believe it. This guy is, wow. A real class act of a Russia. So, hey ficha. She let off wind. According to one interpretation, she sighed. And then she saw the wind leave her. And she said, see the wind that just left me? Just like this wind does not come back to me ever, so too Eliezer ben Drudaya will never be able to come back to Hashem. You're toast. This is what this Zoyne tells him. Eliezer ben Drudaya was a man, right? Like Rabbi said, don't tell me, if you know how to do an aveira, you'll tell me how to do a tshuva. It's like one thing you didn't tell him was no. You never tell me I can't do anything. I will go across 7 seas and get all the money I need to do my aveira. Don't you dare ever tell me that I can't do something. And she dared him because she said, you can't do teshuva. And that aroused him like nothing else. He said, yes, I can. And he left her right then. And he went into the mountains and he started to cry. And he said, let the mountains intercede on my behalf and nothing happens. Let the heavens and earth intercede on my behalf. The seas. He tried everyone to intercede on my behalf and nothing happened. And he realized no one's interceding on your behalf. And so he sank his head between his knees. And he started to wail and to cry. He was crying a real cry of teshuva. And he died in the process of teshuva. His soul left his body. And as his soul ascended to heaven, a baskol, a heavenly voice came out and cried out, Rabbi Eliezer ben Drudaya. He wasn't a rabbi. But the heavenly voice decided that he was. He gave him smicha right then. Rabbi Eliezer ben Dordaya mezuman lechaya Olam Haba is invited straight to the Olam Haba. And Rabbeinu HaKodesh, Rebbe, heard, he sensed that heavenly voice. And he said, wow, yesh koinei olam b'shah echos. Some people can acquire their will to come in one moment. Some of us got to work our whole lives to get the will to come. And this guy, in one moment, he gets his whole world to come. Eliezer ben Dordaya was able to look at what he had done and to completely transform himself through the tears. And you and I really hope we didn't reach a level of Menashe, nor Eliezer ben Dordaya. But maybe Chizkiyahu's type would do us well. There's things which we have which need to be transformed. And what we want to do is be able to identify what we've done, bring it out, and get connected, and do Teshuva on that. Now, very important to understand that, you know how it is in shul, al-chet is supposed to be in many shuls. I think the Ashkenazim don't really know how to do it. You know, my son-in-law is from France. He still tells me how in a French Sephardi shul, they do al-chet. So, true, nobody understands the words, but all the people are there, they're jumping up and down, and they like, and they say, and they're like dancing and singing and whatever. And if you listen to the words, it's a little bit interesting to be dancing and excited at that point. Because we sinned and we botched up and we messed up in this and we messed up in that and messed up in that. What are you dancing for? But you know what? They got it right. Because to do Teshuva is not sad. It's really happy. Because you're cleaning up Hashem's home. My soul is Hashem's home. And if I got issues in it, I'm cleaning it up. So it's not a negative process. It's actually very, very powerful and very positive. The way to do Teshuva is never by focusing on the Aveira. Do you know why? Because you're not sorry for doing the Aveira. What's going to change? If you focus on the Aveira, I'm so sorry for doing the Aveira, now I'm going to stop doing it. You're not stopping to do it. Nothing will change, ever. The only way to do Teshuva is by focusing on Hashem to whom you did the Aveira. That's why, if you pay attention to the davening of Yomim Neroim, like Yom Kippur coming up, what is davening about? We're focused on God. The whole thing is Hamelech, Hamelech, Hamelech. And every time you say, oh my gosh, that's the Melech, that's Hashem, and look at me. It's kind of like a realization, you know, that Hashem takes care of us. He really takes care of us. And what he wants is that we should feel that he takes care of us. But we jump around and get angry and upset and anxious all the time. We run away from Hashem. And Hashem's telling you, hey, you're the wife and I'm the husband. And unlike a regular mortal husband, I'm God. And I can take care of everything by you. All I need is for you to recognize and just put yourself in a space of absolute joy with Hashem. And you go back and you realize, I'm such a nudgy, complaining wife all the time. Me and Hashem, all the time, I'm giving him such, like, Gehenna, all the time, everything I'm complaining about. And Hashem's like, just start showing me some good, exciting love, and let's be together. And Teshuva is the realization of, oi, Hashem loves me, he's showing me this all the time, and all he wants is for me to give back the joy. And I'm blocking the energy. And if you realize how silly we are, how dumb and stupid we are in this process. Because living life is like, yeah, Hashem is giving you all the joy in the world. What he wants you to do is to do Torah and mitzvahs and to get excited over Hashem's presence in your moment. You got to be able to do that in real time, by the way. You know, when you're feeling anxious, you're like, okay, that's hard. Yeah, and Hashem gave me this, and he knows what's good for me, and so he wants me to feel it. I'm going to feel the joy. And that work, the constant work, actually gets you good things. Is it easy? No. Is it rewarding? Powerful. What you want to do is realize who Hashem is and what he's to us. And you sit down and you meditate on that. That's why we have davening. The process of davening is a process of tshuva. It's getting you to realize, Shema Yisrael, listen. Put yourself together, Yisrael. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, there's only Hashem. And as you notice that, and then you're like, and what did I do? And take a look at things you've done, right? It's like, there's very subtle things that we do sometimes. Very subtle. Like, it's just a little, okay, so I got angry at my kid. Okay, so I'm allowed to. I had a fight with my spouse. I had small little things that we do. It's not about saying, oh my gosh, I screamed at my kid. I had a fight with my spouse. So I got to say sorry for that. Because what's going to stop you from doing it again? If you don't change the core of the habit remains. The word of Teshuva is to think about Hashem. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And in that space, while you're in the middle of thinking about it, you look at yourself, Oyvei. There is a special time that we do this. It's called Kriya Shema Shalamita. Once upon a time, they used to have Tikkun Chatzos. Tikkun Chatzos was a time to cry. Kriya Shema Shalamita, very powerful time. There's different nuschos of how to say it. And one of the things you could do, then you say chapter 51 in Tehillim, which is how David HaMelech says, that's Teshuva. Read that chapter, and you see, 51. He had what he did with Bathsheba. And he says, it's a conversation with God. It's not David's conversation, it's your soul's conversation. Your soul is talking to Hashem. Hashem, I get that there's only Hashem in the world. And one day I'm going to be with you, and that's where we all go. Hopefully Mashiach then come and we'll feel it that way, but Hashem is the only reality. And what you want to do is look at yourself in that regard. It's also to forgive yourself, by the way, because you never did anything wrong in the past. You haven't done anything bad. Whatever happened is because Hashem ordained that. And Hashem wanted it to happen. That's why it happened. Doesn't mean you didn't mess up. You did. But Hashem wanted that to happen too. When you realize what God is, it's about getting close to Hashem. Your ability to forgive yourself. Your ability to look back and say, okay, Hashem created me as a mortal human being. I didn't know, I wasn't aware. And so I messed up. It's not about me crying because I'm bad and I'm going to rot in hell. It's about me crying because it's so sad to be disconnected from Hashem. That's the cry. It says, for example, when a person transgresses the sins of youth, which usually are male-female issues, which everyone struggles with on some level, what happens is you become a menuder. What does it mean, a menuder? Menuder means excommunicated. In Teres Chaim, authored by Rabbi Doiber, the Mittler Rabbi is known as, he explains that menuda means Hashem is not going to let you in. You're excommunicated from Hashem's presence. If you find that you can't daven sometimes, you're trying to daven, you're trying to do teshuva, and you don't know how. It doesn't work. I don't know what to do. What you want to do is align the two together. Recognize this, what I've done, and that, what's happening to me, my inability to daven, that's connected. And when you connect them, you realize, oy vey. I hate to do the Musa part, but this is what it is. When a person has issues going on with something I'm struggling with, parnasa, in livelihood, or with my children, and I'm struggling with something, take a look at yourself and say, okay, if I've done this and that is connected. Not as a punishment, not as something bad. As a realization that because I'm disconnected from Hashem, that's why I'm struggling in parnasa. That's why I'm struggling with this. What's my work now? To think about how great Hashem is, not to feel guilty over the past. That's not the point. Hashem did it. Tshuva is for the present. It's for me to see how awesome Hashem is. If you sit down and you think about Hashem, here's the process. Think about Hashem and how great Hashem is. Think about how Hashem instilled the neshama inside me and Hashem is close to me. And then look and say, am I close to Hashem or am I doing things that are dumb and silly and stupid? And then look, and the things that are happening to me are resulting from that, and that's where the tears come about. You don't put on the tears. Tears will happen automatically. If you think about Hashem and where I am, and in that space, that's where the tears come along. Those tears, what they do is, the same as when you have clothing that needs to be washed, you take hot water and you wash it, and it actually changes it. The tears that a person experiences change you. They're actually able to undo a person from a space of negativity to a space of positivity. This is not about, oh, you did something wrong, you're going to rot and suffer, and therefore you better do tshuva, fire and brimstone. Not in the slightest bit. This is about a great God that we have. And when we're connected to Him, not like, oh God, you're going to give me a good year if I behave well. It's not kindergarten. It's about Hashem is inside you. And if you reveal Hashem, if you learn how to communicate nicely with your spouse, you know what's going to happen? The reward? Yeah, you'll have a better relationship. If we learn how to be godly, then godly things happen to us. And it's very sad when we don't, and that's the cry. The cry is for the transformation. To go from one being to another being. And one very important point. You never want to do this process unless you're in a controlled environment. That means the Yetzer Hara is pretty brilliant. What he does is, you're in the middle of a day, he gets you to think, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. Oh, terrible. And it's a serious tshuva, and I heard on the shir, you're going to cry, so I'm going to do tshuva now. When that happens to you, instead of allowing a negative thought inside you, jump for joy. Because it can only be done in a controlled environment. Tshuva means, this is in Tanya, tshuva means I'm going to sit down and I'm deciding now to do teshuva. It means I'm taking a half hour, I'm carving out some time at a night, and I'm going to do Krishma Shalamita, I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to meditate now, and I'm going to do this now. If you're allowing the Yetzer Hara to do it to you, that means in the middle of a Monday, suddenly the Yetzer Hara comes away and makes you want to feel guilty. That's him trying to bring you down, nothing else. Absolutely not. Yom Kippur is a controlled environment. Yom Kippur means I'm going to sit down now and we're going to talk about Al-Chet. We're going to talk about the things that we've done wrong. But you can't talk about things you've done wrong, so let's talk about Hashem. Let's talk about Hashem, who Hashem is, who I am, and let's see the relationship. And then let's go, ouch, I disconnected. If you do that correctly, that controlled environment leads to controlled tears. If it doesn't, that's okay. Don't make the tears come about. It's a controlled environment. If you get there, it changes. There's another Baal Tshuva who's actually one of the most incredulous stories ever. It's a Gemara in Maseches Shabbos. The Gemara brings it, Rashi brings a little bit of an inkling of it. The full story is told in Seder Hadoros, which goes through all the people in Shas and Tanakh. He brings the Seder Hadoros as an ancient book. There he tells a story of a guy by the name of Natan Tzutzita. Anyone heard about him? Nosen Tzutzisa. The story goes like this. So, there was a woman by the name of Chana. This Chana was married. And for whatever reason, she was a very, very, very attractive woman. And Nosen Tzutzisa was the wealthiest guy in town. Very prominent individual, very powerful and wealthy. And he got a strong desire for Chana. And it was so strong that he became ill. So ill that he was deathly ill. And so the doctors came along and said that there's only one way to save his life, and that is if you give him, that's pikuach nefesh basically. So he's going to die, and we have to allow her to come with him. So the rabbis were asked the question, and the rabbis said, let him die. Sorry. Gilei Arayis is Gilei Arayis. So they said, let her speak to him. Just speak to him. Or let her show herself to him without touching. And the sages said, no chance. We don't even do avizarayu de Gilei Arayis. Even an ability, like a little something of Gilei Arayis. They said, let her speak to him behind the fence, it'll save his life. They said, let him die. And then Hannah's husband got into debt. Took some time. He got into crazy debt to the point that he owed so much money on the streets that the local municipality, whatever the pirates of the time, locked him up in a dungeon, put him away, and he told him that until you pay this money, you're going to rot away. And his wife would come to visit him every couple of days, and she came to see him in the prison, and she saw him rotting away and losing. He was dying. And he said, and she was trying her best. She was a very, very special woman, and she tried her best to help her husband any way she could, but nothing was working. Finally, he really couldn't take it anymore. He was dying of starvation. And she came to visit him, and he couldn't take it. And he said to her, I'm so distressed. He says, you have a way to save me. And you know, we all know, that Nasan Tzatzisa wants you. So if you go to him and ask him for the money, he'll give it to you. She said, how could you even tell me that? That's like, what? No way. And he insisted, and he was pushing her. So she told him, okay, if I go, give me a get. He says, I know what your plan is. You want me to die in prison over here so that you can go marry him. And then you'll be a wealthy lady. That's why you want me to die. And the proof is, you want me to give you a get. Anyway, she's not going. This lasted a few more days, a little bit more. And he was begging her each time. He says, I can't, I'm dying, I can't. The worst thing for a man to do is die of hunger. Finally, she said, okay, I'm going to go. And she went. She went to Nasan Tzitzisa's palace, his beautiful mansion. She came outside. She's standing outside. The guard saw her. And the guard, everyone knew what Nasan Tzitsisa wanted. And the guard nearly fell off his feet, ran into the master all the way in to tell him, guess who's here? Hannah's here. He says, if you're telling the truth, you're a free man. And then the maids inside came to tell him, he said, everyone's free if you're telling the truth. And then Hannah shows up. And he was shocked that she had come. And she told him, I came here because I need money for my husband. She told him the story. He says, no problem, done, taken care of. Takes out all the gold and whatever that he needs, and he's lying in his bed. He's like a dying man for already a long time. All the gold, everything, gives her everything. Fills her up, here's all the money you need, go. And then she says to him, we all know what you really want. And now that you've given me all this gold, now I'm in your hands. And now you could do whatever you want to me. But there comes a moment, she says, when every man has the greatest moment for which he was created. And you have the power right now to resist your temptation, to overcome your Yetzer Hara. It's going to be the most difficult thing in the world. There's nothing I can do. You can do whatever you want to me. But I'm telling you that if you do, this will be the most godly act you've ever done. And Hashem will be right there with you in this moment. And Nasan heard these words. And after all this time, and here it is in front of him, his ability to do what he wanted to do. She says, after you do it, you know what's going to happen. The second you've done it, you'll be over. Your taiva will be gone. Conquer your taiva now, as difficult as it is. Nasan turned around and he gave the tefillah to Hashem. He davened to Hashem from the bottom of his heart. And then he said, Hashem, I can't do this myself. Help me. And something happened. And a godly force entered into Nasan. Sometimes you download the power from Hashem. And he looked at Hannah in this moment that he was able to. And he says, you're free to go. Do not touch her. It's a different story to Eliezer ben Dodai. Eliezer ben Dodai did all the Aveiros. And then he did Teshuva. Nasan stopped himself from doing the Aveira. So she went and she gave the money and she freed her husband. Her husband was excited to be free, but he wasn't able to look at her ever again. Because he knew for a fact what she had done. There was no way that not. How could it be? How could it even be possible that the Aveira didn't happen? She said, I didn't do anything. Nothing happened. we're kosher. He said, I don't believe it. Impossible. So he wouldn't touch her. Nosson Tzitzisa was once riding on his donkey. And inside, Rabbi Akiva was sitting, learning with his students. And Rabbi Akiva looked at his students and he says, "Who's that riding on that donkey over there?" And they said to him, "Oh, that's Nosson Roye Zoinois." That means the shepherd of prostitutes, a derogatory term. Because everybody knew who Nosson was, and everybody knew what had allegedly happened. And he said, "What, do you see the pillar of light on his head?" And the student said, "No." And he said, "I've never seen a man who carries divine presence, the Shekhinah, on his head like that. Bring him here now." And Nosson came over, and Rabbi Akiva said to him, "What happened?" And he told Rabbi Akiva the story. Nosson was an Amoritz. He didn't know a word how to learn. Rabbi Akiva said, "Come with me, we're going to learn." And he started to learn. And because he had the Shekhinah, the divine light in him from this incredible tshuva that he had done, Rabbi Akiva was able to teach him. And he sat and learned with Rabbi Akiva together b'chavrusa. He's known in Shas as Mar Ukva Bar Nechemia. That was the name he was given. One day, Chana's husband was walking along, and what does he see? Rabbi Akiva and the chavrusa. He said, "That's Nosson Tzitzisa. What's going on?" And he told him the story and how this man became Rabbi Akiva's chavrusa. And Rabbi Akiva told him, "Your wife is kosher." Nothing happened. And he went back to Chana and he kissed her and he asked her for forgiveness. And they went back to live happily ever after. The story of Nosson Tzitzisa is the power of being able to download the Shekhinah into us. What we want to do is get close to Hashem. The way to get close to Hashem is by looking at all the things that block us from Hashem. So whenever there's an anxiety and a worry and a fear, notice inside you, that's blocking me from Hashem. Sit down by Kriyash Mashalamita, take that time off and focus on Hashem. You need a time to be able to actually do it, where you can focus on Hashem. And then you look at where you are and what you've done in context of that and get to cry. What are we crying for? It's a cry of happiness from the Averas. It's a cry of me looking at, wow, I have Hashem. Not, I'm sorry because I'm going to rot in Ganem. I'm sorry I didn't realize, God, how great you are and how awesome it is to be connected to you and how much you actually love me. And I didn't live my life in that sense. And I'm going to reconnect right now. That's the tears. But you have to ask Hashem for help you. We daven. In davening, we say constantly, Hashem, help us. Shepherd us, hurt us. We can't do this ourselves. It's too hard, too difficult to be able to actually change. Imagine you have an addiction. To be able to actually change, how do you change? You change a habit at its core. When we recognize who Hashem is and what the power of Hashem is. And these stories that are told to us in the Gemara are told to us in order that we should realize the power of a Menashe, of a Chizkiyahu, of a Eliezer ben Dodaya, of a Nosson Tzitzisa, the power of a person to completely and utterly transform himself. It's about recognizing the first thing that's needed is a desire to do Teshuva. A desire that I want to be close to you, Hashem. If you don't want to be close to Hashem, you'll never get there. Once you decide I want to be close to Hashem, the next step is start meditating on Hashem, who Hashem is, contemplating, thinking about Hashem. In that context, you'll start looking and you'll say, oh wow, notice all the things that block you from Hashem. Notice how when you're not able to daven, when you're feeling anxiety, when you're feeling all these things, that's the punishment, the disconnectedness. And notice it and say, wow, Hashem, when I'm with you, it feels so happy. The joy is so great. And in that space, that disparity between the joy you ought to have and the sadness that's going on in my life now and the issues there, that's where tshuva takes place. And if you do it in a controlled environment, it'll lead you to tears. Those tears are the tears of tshuva. They wash away the soul. And like Nosson Tzitzisa, it's critical to ask Hashem, to turn to Hashem and say, Hashem, I don't know how to do this. But I want to do Teshuva. Teshuva is a mitzvah aseh deiraisa, and it's the greatest mitzvah. And a mitzvah azois lo nifleisin imcha v'lo yerchoikahi. Yeah, we like to downgrade it to saying, sorry, Hashem, I'm sorry, charata alava kabbalah la'asid v'didvarim. That's what it is halachically. I've got to say sorry for the past, and I'm taking for the future, and I'm saying what I've done. The way to do it, to be sorry for the past and take a Kabbalah for the future, is by actually meditating on Hashem and our relationship with Him and asking Hashem to help you. And when you do that, you discover that just like Nasan Tzutzisa, you open up your mind and your heart to spaces you never knew were possible. And you become like Rabbi Akiva's Chavrusa. Because suddenly you're able to see Hashem in a whole new light.